Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast, show number 45.
But when you actually look and you're leaning into your purpose and using that into the service of other people is when you unlock this unlimited happiness. When you unlock the ability, because it's not about the money, it's about serving others, and that has an exponential return.
Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host Eric and Tiffany Vogel. We've spent several hard years building a rental property portfolio so we can have more time with our family and live our ideal life. Now, finding your path can be difficult, so we're here to guide you along the way with lessons, tips, and tricks to design and implement your dream life. Now, sit back, turn up the volume, smash that follow button, and get ready for this episode of the On Purpose Investor. Hey y'all, and welcome back to the On Purpose Investor Podcast. I am here today with best-selling author Jake Harris. He is the author of the big hit seller on Amazon right now, Catching Knives. Jake, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
So when I got the email for you to come on the show, I was super excited to delve into everything Jake Harris. Just to start this out right, y'all, if you go online and just type in catchknives.com, you're going to find everything Jake Harris there. His book, Catching Knives, is a guide to investing in distressed commercial real estate. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. But first, I want to just get our listeners familiar with Jake Harris. Who are you? What do you do? So let's start with our first question, Jake. What do you invest in?
So yeah, that's an interesting question because I have been an investor for 20 years and I've invested into a lot of different things over the course of those 20 years. It primarily or initially started as single family houses and flipping those. And then I kind of built that out at scale. And so we did, I think, 1,300 flips across 23 states. We aggregated some single family rental portfolios that we sold off to the institutional investors, the Invitation Homes, Colony Capital, Tricon, and the likes. And actually I got kind of a job offer to run an acquisitions for one of these big funds because they said, hey, the portfolios we bought of yours were some of the best. And maybe there's an opportunity to run that. So I actually, felt like that was my tap on the shoulder to go run and set up my own private equity real estate company. And so since that time in the last 7-8 years has been primarily focused on commercial real estate. I do land entitlement, buying infill stuff, rezoning it, buy a handful of historic buildings and do adaptive reuse. So converting those from like an office and moving them to multifamily. And then we do some ground up construction, apartment, hotel, and others. And so it kind of is a gambit of things, but specifically it's to some markets that I'm really, really bullish on because of the demographics. And I'm a really data-driven investor. And so I am very bullish on the market. And then I'm looking for good deals, a little bit more agnostic to the specific deals in those particular markets. And that is mostly Central Texas.
Right on. You got your hands in a lot of different fires. It's not like you got a lot of irons in the fire. You got a lot of different fires with different irons. And I think, that is a great strategy to be successful in an ever-changing market, especially if you're highly successful in one of them and you've got a lot of systems set up and it's kind of automated and you can move to something else and start on something else. Love the idea of what you're doing with the mixed use and redeveloping something old and making it new. And I love that idea. I think it's a great idea. I wish I had the tools and tricks to do that. I can learn. I'm going to read Catching Knives and figure out how I can implement that into mine and my wife's business here in Georgia. So you answered that a little bit at the end in Texas, but you also said you've done work over 23 different states. So where is your primary focus of investing?
Yeah. So from that, people say, hey, you do a lot of different things. Well, really, it depends on the investment bucket that we're investing out of. And so that is oftentimes led with an investment thesis in our business plan. So sometimes these are cash flow. These are long-term holds. These are, ground up projects. And so those individual collective group of investors, are kind of driving that overall business plan. And so that was one of the big things that I discovered is initially being kind of opportunistic and just trying to find a good deal was what got me into real estate. And so I was actually casting too wide of a net. Residential and single family houses were like the easiest thing to get into because I could, on my own money, invest into them. And then as I kind of scaled, I need to bring on a few other particular investors, specifically, in 2012, Blackstone came into the market and, really started buying, Invitation Homes started buying a lot of houses at scale, hundreds, thousands of properties, and they were actually paying over market value. So if a house, and I'll give you an example, is a $200,000 house at the time, that's what it was worth. They were coming in and paying $250,000 for a house. And it was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would you pay $250,000 for a house that's only worth $200,000 and you still had to fix it up? You still had to do all of these other things. And really what I go back to is they were playing a different game. They were investing on an investment in a business plan that was based on a previous peak price. And so they're like, we're willing to pay up to 70% of previous peak price. So if that home was previously worth $500,000, we'll pay up to $350,000, at all in cost, and be great because we think it's going to shoulder off of that previous high, go to there and go above that. So even though today's pricing was $200,000, they didn't care about what today's pricing was. They were buying things kind of by the pound. And so that is, again, part of it goes back to is understanding your business plan in which you're going to ultimately kind of execute. It gives you a lot tighter constraints of what you can and cannot do within your investment theories. And this is what I talk to a lot of people about is you need to first define what you want to do, get very, very crystal clear, laser-like focus, use a buy box or investment thesis or some kind of criteria. And it allows you to say no to a lot more deals. And so if you go on and log on to MLS or Crexy or CoStar or LoopNet or any one of these things, and then you're just looking for a good deal, what you get is a little bit of mental masturbation as far as, because you just look and it's just, oh, this is a good deal. And this is here and it's in Ohio and then it's in Georgia and this one's over in, Alabama. And I'm going to go and look at all these things. So because you haven't really defined what it is that your business plan is, you get, overwhelmed. And so it allows you to basically to procrastinate. And going back to, like, we had a particular investment thesis on a market on Central Texas based on here's the population growth, here's the job growth, here's the affordability index, here's the other things. So our investment criteria is specifically from Austin to San Antonio. From Austin to San Antonio, now we're looking for if it's a land deal or if it's commercial or something along those lines that we have skill sets in, then we know that this is what, because our investment thesis was based on the market fundamentals. And that was really based on if you just invest in like the top performing market from last year, like you have a 98% chance of success just reinvesting into that market. And I've seen this and done this in the past. I overpaid for assets, not because I wanted to, but the market momentum actually moved it. And so it's like you can be Michael Phelps of swimming, Michael Phelps, and you're trying to swim against the waves, against the current, and you have to just be incredibly skilled to do that. Olympic, level swimmer. Or what you can do is just get your little boogie board and get in front of the waves and have the market momentum go with you. And then you don't have to be as good. And then obviously in or at least my buy box, I'm a value investor. I'm looking and I'm trying to buy stuff that's worth $1. I'm trying to buy it for 70 or 80 cents on the dollar. And then that's where it's kind of playing out to. So Central Texas, San Antonio is the market that I've been really, really focused on the last several years. And that's kind of adapted and changes as the fundamentals of real estate have changed, as interest rates, as population declines have moved around, we have the ability, even though some of these are long-term holds, but then as new acquisitions are coming in, we're evaluating those kind of annually and looking into it like, do we still believe in this investment thesis, or do we want to do more of those? Do we want to raise more capital around those? And specifically, and there's also some other things that we're not necessarily focused on San Antonio that we're going to be rolling on to into the near future.
Right on, Jake. So on these properties you're investing in, or you said that you're, repurposing old, you're buying, for 70 cents on the dollar. Are you turning these into investment properties, rentals, or are you flipping these properties?
I would say both, but more so cash flow now. And so it's, going in. So either building something for instance, we have an office building that stayed an office building. We were just able to buy it at a good, price. It made the most sense to just do a modernization. It hadn't been remodeled since the 80s, to bring in new fiber to the building, upgrade the elevators, upgrade the lobby. And so what we were at, a really low rate, we could even move it up to here and still do a okay from office rent, and nobody else can really compete or be under us on pricing. And so we like that versus, and we've done this on another building where we bought a 10-story historic building, converted to 63 apartments, and we gutted the entire building. And then that cost a lot of money to go do that gut remodel, and the infrastructure backbone of the building, everything needed to be upgraded. And so then you just, calculate those things out and say, hey, does it make more sense as multifamily? Sometimes it makes more sense as an office. And then we let the numbers kind of dictate where that kind of goes to. And, sometimes the numbers work out and we go, yeah, let's go do this deal. Sometimes we get into the numbers and it doesn't work out. And you go, well, it doesn't work out. Unless we can buy it for even cheaper. If not, we walk away. And the last couple of years, we haven't been able to buy a whole lot of stuff. The market's been very frothy and crazy and just didn't make sense. And as someone that's a value investor, it was very, very difficult to find a good deal on anything. And so now we think that now here 2023 we think some of those deals are going to start coming back. We're starting to see some things and some capitulation of the sellers to what is the reality. And as that bid and ask get closer and closer together, I think there's some opportunity to continue to buy more deals. And what I talk about in the book, and specifically around this, is so distressed assets, a foreclosure, a bad condition, something, and I don't know if in any of your experiences, but even in good markets, in good economic booms, people have issues. They have health issues. Somebody passes away. They want to just get rid of the property. Grandpappy bought it, 100 years ago for a wooden nickel. And now, the family doesn't want to deal with it, so all of a sudden, these things happen. But when you're in an area where there's going to be deals that are abounding, you have to be able to move quickly. And that goes back to the whole theory of the catch knives and why I even call it catching knives.
Yeah. So I was not very familiar about the terminology falling knives until we're doing some refinancing on some properties. And one of my agents came to me and said, hey, it's just like the fallen knife, let the knife fall and then we'll do something else. I'm like, it's so weird that you just said that because I'm interviewing a guy that wrote a book called Catching Knives. He's like, yo, you should go read about falling knives. I was like, okay, well then I need to figure out about falling knives and then why he is trying to catch them. So it was that day. It was a few days ago that I was like, I got to order that book and really figure out what is catching knives. So exactly what is a falling knife and what is your idea behind catching those knives?
You're not alone. My wife also asked these same things. She's like, I don't know. It seems violent. Like, what is this? So I was clever with the title. And part of it is, so in the financial world, and it's often equated to the stock market, is when a devaluation is happening. And let's say, Tesla stock is at $420 a share, and then it starts falling down and you want to wait until kind of the values have kind of bottomed out. And then when you buy back in, and so if you might just be like, all right, it's gone to 69, like, let's go buy a bunch of Tesla shares. Well, in the equities world, bonds or REITs or stocks in general, you can go buy in anytime that you want. Hey, it went down from 420 to 200 to 69. You jumped in, you bought those. In as many shares as you probably want to invest, you can go buy those at that time. But real estate, it's scarce, meaning that, that office building in downtown, Atlanta may only transact once a generation. And so when that distress does happens, and when there's a circumstance in which you need to be able to go buy that, or the incidence is I bought a lot of stuff at foreclosure and the courthouse steps, you might only have a couple of weeks to prepare for a sale or a transaction, and you need to come in and move quickly, and you could get it not at 70 cents at all, you get it 60 or 50 or 30 or 20, because there was a very big disconnect from what it was worth to what it was going to transact on. And so the bigger the dollar amount, the more homework and the more preparation you need to do before it actually comes time to sell. And so it's a little bit of like skating to where the puck is. Like, you need to go do the work. You need to assemble your team. You need to go prepare for your investment thesis or your criteria before it actually happens. The reason being is that when that opportunity, that knife is falling, you will have the ability to reach out and catch it and not get cut. And it doesn't matter if that valuation goes down even further if you're executing your business plan. So again, you go buy a building that was, worth 10 million. Now it's selling for 6 million. Let's say it continues to go down and now it's only worth $5 million. But that's okay, because your business plan was to fix it up or to modernize it. And then you're not going to sell it until 5 years or 10 years into the future when the values come back up. And so you're like, great, you make your money on the buy. And it only requires one other person to try to buy that asset. And if they buy it, you're out. All the homework you did, all the efforts. So unlike the stocks where, hey, I want to buy a stock, you want to buy a stock, we go buy it tomorrow, we can both, win out on that because it's our little fractional share. But if it is an apartment building, it is an office building, it's a hotel or anything else, all the things, there's only one of those that may trade once in a generation. But also what it can do is it can create generational financial freedom. One transaction. Which is interesting. I don't know if I don't think I addressed this in the book. I met a billionaire. I was having lunch with him, and talking to him. Next to the 10-story building, I have, in downtown San Antonio, there's a 32-story office building, and it's called the Weston Center. And his name is Graham Weston. He is a billionaire, multi-billionaire. He bought that 32-story office building at auction. And he only had a few $1 million that we borrowed from an investor. And he got the bank to carry back the remainder because he was going through a foreclosure and distress. Sam Zell was trying to outbid him. He bought it, moved in some new tenants, refinanced the property all within like 6 months, paid all of his investors back, and has owned this 32-story office building his, entire investment career. It was actually the first piece of real estate that he ever bought in his entire life. He was 25 years old, 27 years old. He didn't even own a house, but he had a 300,000 square foot or 250,000 square foot office building that was 32 stories in downtown on a few $1 million of borrowed money that he just moved. And he moved a new tenant into the building at 28. And so then he's been making hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash flow on that one deal because he took action, because he was in the right place and in taking action and being prepared for that when it did happen. And that has then made him a billionaire because he had cash coming in that he invested into other businesses. And then one of those businesses turned into a $10 billion business.
Yeah. And one thing that still rings true today within the residential side of things is the word action. That's such an important word. And it's one word that prevents the majority of those investors, wannabe investors, not saying that derogatorily, just people that really want to be investors, that study their butts off, that read a lot, that define their buy box, that figure out exactly what they want to invest in. but they're super afraid. They get analysis paralysis and they never take action. If Weston never took action on that opportunity and caught that knife, he would have never gotten to the success that he is today. He would have never achieved that, lifetime generational wealth that he has created. And it's the same in residential, because there were times in 2018, 2019, when house prices were starting to go up. They hadn't surged just yet. And people would list their properties and they were starting to disappear really quick. The time on market was starting to dwindle in late 2019-ish. And something Tiffany and I, my wife, we had a buy box. We had financing figured out. We had all of our tools in place. And when a property would come on and the MLS notified us and we saw it come on, we'd be under contract within an hour or 2 hours, instead of those others that are not taking instant action and don't have the clarity to see, oh, this is exactly my buy box. This is exactly where I want it to be. There's value add here. There was no question for us. We knew when to push the button to say, go. And we had everything lined up. Like you said, have your team assembled and ready to stick your hand out there and catch the knife, or else someone else is going to catch it, or it's going to fall all the way to the bottom, and then it's going to go to that auction and then sell to the highest bidder, whatever. What you're saying and what you're preaching here is so important for people to hear, especially on my platform, is that even in big commercial real estate, it's very similar to residential real estate. It takes having that clarity of, what do you really want? How much money are you willing to spend on it? Do you have your team assembled? Do you have your financing lined up? Do you have your criteria fully strategized? That way you can say, yes, we're doing this and we can go under contract right now, versus, well, let me do my due diligence and let me get through all of this. It's what separates those that want to really be successful and those that are really successful.
100%. Taking action.
So Jake, I know I saw in your video that you had this dream or this mission to become a millionaire before you were 30. And you said, it's not done there. I wasn't finished. I was only simply beginning. My question is, how did you get to that point? How did you get to that millionaire by 30? And from your humble roots, which I'm sure they're there, how did you get started from the ground up?
Yeah. So there's a few different things that to be successful in business. So there's systems, there's people, and there's mindset. And so each one of those is equally important, or, has equal kind of value to it. Like, you can have great mindset, take action, but if you don't have proper systems, it kind of all falls apart. If you don't have the ability to work with people and you trust that. And so point is, I actually lack systems. I had the mindset, and so I was able to take action. And I say this is, I lived it, and then I read it in a book, in Atomic Habits, years later in James Clear. But it's like, goals are great for one-time success. Systems are for those that want repeatable and predictable success. And so what happened was, I put a goal of being a millionaire before 30, and I achieved it. And it's similar to like people that say, my goal is to lose 20 pounds. What happens, and a lot of people do go to lose 20 pounds, but what happens is they go put on 25 afterwards. They didn't adapt their systems, that their output resulted in them losing 20 pounds. What they were doing was they were just so focused on their goal, just like I was focused on being a millionaire before 30. I was so myopically focused on that. I let all of the other things kind of go in my life. And so the reality is that money's fake. The government just, printed out trillions of dollars and threw it out the window. It's fugazi. It's still like real, as it's a tool of economic measurement. But the reality is that there's 5-6 other areas of your life that make up who you are as an individual. How are your relationships? With your kids, your wife, your parents? How is your health? Because I'm a terrible investor or husband or, father, or any of those things if I'm dead. So it's like, how your health becomes more and more important. And everybody that I do know that has had health issues, they're like, would you trade all the money that you have to have good health again? And they're like, absolutely. Money becomes, and again, where it being fake, it is a vanity kind of thing and keeping the score of the game. Are you having bucket list adventures? Are you living a life of purpose? How are you giving back to others? How are you giving back to your church or to the universe or to society as a whole? And all of those things have purpose and value. And so like I was probably bankrupt in all the other areas of my life that I was myopically focused on a goal of making money. And what I realized is when that did happen was, the market corrected in 07, 08, it kind of all evaporated and went away. It was that to my benefit was it happened for me that to allow myself to focus on all these other aspects of life and to make sure that I was doing better and better and achieving. And then the retooling of the system that allowed that the income or the net worth or those other things became a byproduct of what I was doing every single day. And so to me, I have enough kind of passive income, like I could just quit, not work anymore. And my wife sometimes would be like, why do you still work? Why do you do like, but part of it is who I am is like, I have to do this. I believe that everybody has to do work. Now, the question is are you doing the work that is aligned with the purpose of why were you put on this planet? And the reality is if it's just to get a nicer car or to get a bigger house or doing those other things, it runs out. But when you actually look and you're leaning into your purpose and using that into the service of other people is when you unlock this unlimited happiness, when you unlock the ability, because it's not about the money, it's about serving others. And that has an exponential return. And so like when people come back and say, hey, I loved your book, it helped change, my mindset and it's going to make a difference for my kids' lives. Like that's way more rewarding than me making a certain check out of a particular deal. And so that's why I work. And I think that's we're all tasked and given with, doing those things. And it doesn't feel like work to me when I'm doing the thing that is in alignment with my purpose. Of course, I don't live in a, world of sunshine and rainbows that there's not, crappy things that I don't have to do or things that I don't like doing. I still have to do those, but it's like now I'm creating systems and allowing people and other things to handle some of the things that I'm just not naturally good at and to allow them that they're good at that and then employing the right people and putting them on the right seat of the bus. And so for me, that's a very long-winded way is like the systems become very, very important to developing the success that you want in life. And oftentimes for me, I was only or have been, my success has been limited to my own personal development. I didn't know how to do those other things. And so I had to get better as an individual. I couldn't move to the next level. I couldn't go to the 2.0 version or 3.0 or the 4.0 version of myself. And so that's where I like things like Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way, or the ego is the enemy. And the Stoic philosophy is like, it's kind of like a video game. Life is an uphill journey the entire way. There is no, when I'm a millionaire, it's going to be easy. When I'm 65, it's going to be easy. It's just understand that it is a uphill journey the entire way. It's never going to be easy. But when you're actually playing in the lane of living into your purpose and doing that into the service of other people, it feels more in alignment and congruent with what you should be doing. And it doesn't feel like the work that is climbing the mountains. And so that's just for me, how I've found and a lot of that has been making lots of mistakes in doing that. And every time I made these mistakes, I go, what do I need to learn now?
Yeah. That was an incredible answer and just really dove into a lot of things that I love to talk about, which is we do a thing called the circle of life. When we talk about those categories of your life, your family, your spirituality, your fitness, your eating habits, all the things like that. And we love to ask people, score yourself in each of these and on a scale of 1 to 10 and shade it in and see where you're feeling very successful and rate yourself where you feel like you're failing at. And we did this when we first did a real big goal setting retreat for my wife and I, and we saw that we valued ourselves at different ways. And that really helped us to navigate and say, okay, we're financially free. We're good on that. We need to stop dedicating so much of our energy to acquisitions and to building it up even more. we're not feeling great on this physical fitness side. Let's go do yoga. Let's start, working out. Let's start eating right. And so that's something we have recently done is we've recently started seeing, acupuncturists and doing yoga and getting more into touch with what is our bodies really needing right now. And what do we need to do to get more in line with where the universe is telling us to go? And that's something, and I'm just, when you said that, it's just struck me. It's like, I think I was meant to have this phone call with you today so that you would strike me with what you just said. And it did. And sometimes the world has a way of talking to you through different vehicles, and you have to have the right set of ears on to be able to hear it. And hopefully there's someone out there listening to this podcast that is needing to be reminded that you're okay at this part of your circle. This part of your circle is good. You need to back off and go give more to your family, or go give more to your pets, or go give more to your fitness, or something of that nature. This really helps me to drive into the next area that I love to talk about on this podcast, which is your mindset. And I like to talk about scarcity versus abundance. How has your ideals in scarcity and abundance, how have they shifted? How have they evolved when it comes to time and when it comes to money?
Yeah, I think that's the big dichotomy of life is like I said before, money's fake, but time is real. Mm-hmm. And from that is understanding and starting to look at things of how do you start buying back your time? So using money to buy back your time. And that's the one that the secrets of the wealthy and the rich is they don't work for money. So when you make money, how can you use that money to actually free up, enhance, or do something else? And so that's where like some of those systems, like hiring people is a big component of that. It buys back a certain amount of your time. If you're doing the tasks that are assistant related task, you're essentially an assistant. And so what happens is you need to get better at understanding and protecting your time. So that was the other big thing we talked about even at the beginning of this was like saying no to more things. The more clear that you get on your vision for your own life, having your vivid vision, and this is what I want to do, it allows you to stop comparing yourself to other people. Oh man, Eric's got 100,000 in passive income, this month. Oh, he's got, 200. I'm not there yet. Well, that's great for you. That may not be right for me. What I invest into may actually not be appropriate for other people, and things that, someone else invests to may not be appropriate for me as well, because it's not to who I am or the investment criteria. So understanding how do you protect your time, and then how do you start time blocking that out? And then it's, this year we actually did, I don't know if Jesse Itlzer, his big ass calendar where you put all the like family things on your calendar first. Then you start putting and mapping out like, my family board meetings. We do an international trip with my kids every year. We do these, like started blocking out all of these things. Like, here's all the things that make up my having an awesome and rad life, and putting those things on there in the place first. Mm-hmm. And then because life has the ability to fill up to the vessel that it is, those time wasting meetings, the text messages, the calls, the social medias, the movies, those other things, those become the filler things that are left. And what happens if you don't plan out your life accordingly, it takes over that, and you have no time for working out. You have no time for date night. You have no time for those bucket list adventures or going on an international trip or doing those other things. So for me, it was that flipping of the script is here's what we're doing. We're protecting our time first and foremost. And then that sometimes means that business is going to suffer, but I'm okay with that because I'm a family man that has a business. And just that phraseology changing it is I'm a family man, so my business will suffer for my family. Many times it's opposite. Oh, I just got to do this one more call. I got to do this one more deal. I got to do these other things. I can't make it to soccer practice. I can't pick you up from school today. And I'm not saying that you have to be 100% available. There is times that when you're away from your family, especially oftentimes as men, that you're out the hunters and gatherers, doing those other things. There's still an appropriate balance to that. You don't have to be home 100% of the time, but allowing you to control your time is the biggest win that the wealthy have ever unlocked. And not all of them even understand this themselves. How many billionaires have to commit suicide before people realize that money is not the key?
Yeah. That's so powerful to shift that ideology of I'm a businessman and I have a family versus I'm a family man and I have a business. That's such a great way to start talking to yourself. You are what you tell yourself you are. And if you tell yourself every day that I'm a businessman and I have a family, you're telling yourself every day what your priorities are. And I know for me, my wife and I run our business together, and that is not our sole priority in our life. Our sole priority in our life is our children, and making sure our children are brought up in a world that they can value the things that we didn't learn until way later in life how to value, which is, it's not about going to college and getting that 4-year degree to go get that job to work 50 years to hopefully retire one day with a 401k. That is not the everlasting American dream. It is, how can you create opportunities for money to work for you so that you can spend time doing the things you love? And that's what we want to be able to shift the thinking patterns on with our children, and not just our children, but get them inspired by it, get them excited about it so they can tell their friends and so that they can start becoming teachers of it as well. So another thing I like to talk on this show is sacrificing, and sacrifice is needed to make it. A lot of people think that real estate can be a get rich quick scheme. They feel like that it is always just they hear the glory of the DIY network, of the, Chip and Joanna Gaines and their show. I love Chip and Joanna, and I've read all of their books that they have, and they'll tell you straight up, it's not like the show. But what sacrifices do you feel you've had to make? Like some of your biggest monumental sacrifices that you think you've had to make for you to make it throughout these years of investing?
Yeah, I love that you say that and kind of talk about that, because that is the reality. Is we have a motto, my family, Harris's do hard things. And so you get to choose your hard. So the hard of, let's say, putting in the work in the gym, working out every day, you can choose that. Or by default, the harder of being overweight and unhealthy and dying 5 or 10 years early. Maybe you don't get to see your kids graduate. Maybe you don't get to be there for their wedding. And that's pretty damn hard. But the thing is do you do the hard of working out every day so that you can be there and at least position yourself? And I'm not saying that just because you work out every day, you can't have crazy things happen. You get struck by lightning, the bus hits you across the street, something like that. But the reality is that you have certain things that you can control. Mm-hmm. And so from sacrifice is what my intention around that is that the things that you can control, do those. And it often relates to is, everyone has fear. I have fear. You have fear. Those fears are different. And there's a breakdown of those fears. And it's often a feel of failure, of embarrassment, of, abandonment, of rejection. Even people have fears of success. They're afraid of success. They're afraid of sharing their light. And so, and all of these that we all have in us. And there's an amazing book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Wrote Think and Grow Rich. Outwitting the Devil didn't come out until maybe the 90s or 2000s. They held it off until long after he had passed away. And the reality is everything in the world is in balance. There's God and the devil. There's the positive electrons and the negative electrons. Everything kind of comes in balance. And so everything is both positive and negative. But as humans, we have the ability to construct our meaning and value of that thing. So like I did earlier, that losing all the money, the going through foreclosure, losing, millions of dollars of value of real estates and sitting on a street corner in Tucson and crying, which I talk about in the book. It was like, how is that a benefit for me? At the time, it sure didn't feel like a benefit, but the long term was that added to me. It allowed me to, retool. And so there are sacrifices. You have to go face those fears. You have to go put yourself in a place. And that is oftentimes you're going to have to leave behind the person that you once were. And you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. So then it comes back to is like, what was young Jake? And as a father, and I see this now, and it's not about buying the things, your kids, the things that you wish you had. It's about teaching them things you wish you learned. And so that becomes such an amazing and powerful thing is like exactly what you said earlier. Teach them these things that you wish you learned. Maybe we can create the constructs of the environment. Let's play cash flow. Let's go play these games. What are assets? What are liabilities? How does credit work? And so you have the ability to kind of manipulate the environment and incept some of these concepts, but then you don't actually have the ability to make sure that they do that. So, but understanding is how can you start teaching those things and plant that seed that hopefully at some point in the future that connects through. And what we even talked about earlier was frequency is also a really big thing. Sometimes people can't hear certain things at certain timing. What I'm saying right now, there's some people it's not going to resonate with.
Yeah.
I don't like them. I don't like guys with bald heads. If they're a bully with the thing. Tony Robbins can go say something, and I can actually say the exact same words that Tony Robbins says. And some people can't hear it from Tony Robbins, but they can hear it from me. And so what happens is like, you think about it, is like there's radio frequencies on the radio station, 92.7 and 101.1. If you're turned in at 101.1, it doesn't matter that they're playing the same exact song at 92.7. You can't hear it because you're not tuned into that frequency. You're not connected to that thing. And so like for me, talking about was facing my own fears, that fear of the imposter syndrome. Like they've already heard this, they can go read the same books. But the reality is that sometimes at the right time and the right message and the right frequency and the right consistently, it connects through and it triggers something in you. I'm never going to teach you anything on your own. It is only you unlocking yourself that something connects and it weighs on your heart and it connects with your soul that you're like, I'm going to make a decision now. I'm moving forward. I'm going to do these next things to better my future, go work out more, invest in and take action. But I can't actually do any of those things for anybody.
A lot of people ask me, why do you read the same book like once every year? And it's exactly what you're saying. Sometimes you're just not ready to interpret the words on the page the way that you need to. And you're not in frequency to read that sentence the way it needs to be read. I mean, I've read, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Rhinoceros Success by Alexander Hill. I read that book once a year, and every year I get something new out of it. When I first read it, it was, okay, I'm not a cow. I'm not in the grazing pasture. I'm in the jungle, and I'm charging after my goals. It was great motivation to get me off my butt and moving forward. And then the more I read it, the more I'm pulling out little pieces of, well, okay, I'm an advanced rhino now. I'm not just a normal rhino. I'm now a great white rhino. and you read, Cash Flow Quadrant, or I read Fake by Kiyosaki, he talks about fake teachers and fake money. And, I've read that once, but I've also read it again. And every time I read something, I get something new out of it. I'm doing some James Wedmore training right now. He is a guy that teaches business by design, and he calls it his Wedmore woo-woo, where he goes and we do hypnosis events, and we do hypnosis like little periods of time in the training. And I go back and I do them, and he has the same prompts throughout them, but every time there's something a little bit different that I either visualize or something I feel. And then usually the next day there's something new that I want to take on, something new that I want to figure out more. So love what you're saying about the frequencies. Here at the On Purpose Investor, we're on a mission to get our listeners to begin living a life of hyper intentionality and to live their lives more on purpose. What would you say has been the one thing to help you live your life with more intention and more clarity?
So I think it starts with goals, a vision. And actually, I love the book Vivid Vision by Herold. Is creating a vision for your life. What does your dream life look like? And the more specificity that you can get to that, the more that you get in tune with that. And so what happens is many people want to achieve a certain amount of money. Like they just pick a random number. I want to make $1 million a year. And you're like, okay, cool. That's great. Why? And so what happens is, and many people have been willing to sacrifice maybe a lot more than they needed to get there because they had arbitrarily picked a number and they didn't do the homework to actually dial in and dig into the details. So start with the vision. What's it feel like? What's it look like? What's it taste? All of those things. Don't be concerned with how to get there yet. But then actually, once you have developed that vivid vision, then you can start reverse engineering. And some of the things you're not going to know how to do. But what happens is the more that you start projecting that and putting it out, and the more clear that you get with your vision, the more that those opportunities just present themselves. And you've used that and seen that, the Pygmalion effect or self-fulfilling prophecy, or like you go buy a new Toyota and then all of a sudden you see every Toyota that around, I've never seen this, super rare. And then literally you start driving around and now there's 10,000 of them everywhere. And so it's the same thing as when you get clear on what you want, then all of a sudden it's always been there. All those opportunities for you to have that have always been there. You just haven't been able to see them. That's reality. Is make those goals. Get that vision, get the thing, is that's the direction you want to go in your life. And then what happens is the path will reveal itself. The teachers will reveal themselves. The people and the messages that you can now hear, or the frequency, or get tuned into, now start happening.
Amen to that. All right, Jake, you ready to get to our fast five?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. So number one, Jake, what advice would you give to our investors trying to get started today?
Ideas are shit. Action is everything. And so there's no such thing as $1 million idea. There's only $1 million execution. So to your point earlier, action.
Amen. Number two, do you have any YouTube or podcast shows that you would recommend to our listeners?
I've kind of not been on YouTube in a while, just more creating my own content. But the podcast that when I do get a chance to connect up with is the All In podcast. I really enjoy that, just the way that their thought process. Anything by Naval Ravikant is amazing. He's beyond. And then I'm kind of weird on some of these YouTube things. I watch some of these guys that build stuff. And so there's a guy that built an airplane, a short takeoff stall. It was called DRACO, DRACO. Mike Patey was his name. He built this plane, and he's like, it was fascinating to watch it, the build series of it. So,
that's super interesting. I'm going to go look at that as soon as we get done. All right. Number three, if you had to pick one book that you feel has made the biggest impact on your life, what would it be?
Well, I'd say the Bible for me. I have faith, and all of this is, ultimately to glorify, and our purpose is to serve and to love others. And so I read that every day. I read that with my kids every single day, and it has made the biggest impact on my life overall. And if it was besides the Bible, I would say Powerhouse Principles by Jorge Perez.
All right.
And that's Jorge, Perez.
All right. And just so y'all know, in the show notes for this episode, we're going to have links to everything that we have talked about this whole show. So don't feel like you got to stop the episode right now and write that down. It will be in the show notes. So go click on these links, and everything Jake has mentioned today, go get it right now. All right. Number four, what do you feel has been the secret sauce to your success?
Being naive enough to take action, but also humble enough to know that I don't know everything and seek advice. And so by taking action, because I believe in what I talked about earlier, is just you have to start, you have to do something. You only need to sometimes figure out the next step on the stair or the path. You don't need to see the entire staircase. You don't need to see the entire, trail. Sometimes all you need to do is see the next step. And then through that next step, we'll reveal the next step and the next step. And so take action, and nobody has it figured out.
That's so great. That's a good reminder. Just no matter what level you're at, just stay humble in general. That's That's so great. Number 5, and our last question for today, Jake. How can our listeners get in touch with you and follow you on your journey?
So catchknives.com, you can go buy the book. Actually, the audio book, I think, just came out this week. And so that's starting to come out in different distributors. That will be up soon on the website. You can sign up for the newsletter there. We have a due diligence course that we teach people about, once you're starting to get into commercial real estate deals, there's a much bigger weight to that, making sure to prepare yourself for that due diligence, how we can help coach some of those people through. Jake.realestate on Instagram. And that's most platforms. I think we were talking earlier. I'm on the TikToks and the YouTubes and all the things and the Twitters and everywhere else. So Jake Harris Real Estate usually pulls up a lot of those. And I'm out there a little bit everywhere. Find me there. Sign up for any of those stuff. If you found this to be helpful, reach out, let me know. And I always like hearing from people.
Jake, we really appreciate you being here on the On Purpose Investor podcast. It's been a treat, and I look forward to catching up in the future and writing that review on Catching Knives. All right, take care, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for our newsletter to get all the latest updates. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate an honest review wherever you watch our podcast. All right, now go smash that subscribe and follow button for more tips on building your dream life. See you next week, Pathfinders.